Hello and welcome to Game and Gadget Podcast number 21, but this isn't your typical Game and Gadget podcast. This is a special. So Tony Warriner has been co-host of the Game and Gadget Podcast for a number of months and months and months now, has, if you're listening to previous podcasts, been scribbling away at a book as well as a new game, but we're here today to talk about his book, which he's just put on Kickstarter. And within, I think it was 4 days, achieved his goal. And now it's funded with currently 179 backers, and I'm sure that will increase because there's still 25 days to go. So first of all, congratulations on that very quick funding of a Kickstarter, because they're not all successful. Yeah. And so, yes, Tony Warriner, writer of the new book, co-founder of Revolution Software. Welcome again, Tony.
Thank you very much, James.
And would you like to invite our extra guest here today?
Joining us now is my good friend and co-editor Martin Mulrooney, who's been helping me the last 6 months or so with the book. And I mean, it works very well because Martin, he's pretty much a scholar of Revolution and knows more about some bits of it than I do, to be honest. So it was a very good partnership, and he certainly writes better English than I do. So between the two of us, we've put this book together and made it readable.
Fantastic. So welcome to the show, Martin. And maybe we can start with you, as Tony, obviously being co-founder, is going to have a very specific view of Revolution Software. But what was your perspective of Revolution?
Yeah, I guess I was pretty well placed because the reason it actually came up, I was talking to Tony, actually, we're not quite sure 100% how this happened, but my understanding is that I met Charles a few times throughout the pandemic, around the time they were doing Beyond the Steel Sky. I did an interview with him for that, and Charles is quite difficult to pin down for interviews and things, and I'm quite shy doing stuff like this. And Charles had always said, I'll do an interview, and I'd email him, and it would never happen. So in the end, during the pandemic, I had plenty of time on my hands at home. So I bit the bullet and did quite a few Skype chats with Charles, and I ended up doing an interview about Beyond the Steel Sky, and then I did another one for the 25th anniversary of Broken Sword, which is quite funny because I said, can I interview you for the 25th anniversary? And he didn't realise it was the 25th anniversary. So all their social media channels started panicking and putting updates about it. But off the back of that, when I was speaking to Charles, I said, there's a lot of stuff here that is really interesting, that's probably going to be lost to time, I guess. Because even Charles was saying, his memory's hazy on a lot of things, and, a lot of people have passed away, unfortunately, over the years. So I started thinking it'd be really good if somebody wrote a book about Revolution. And around that time, I saw Tony do a tweet, I think, saying that he was doing it. And I was I was excited because, I've always wanted to have that insight into Revolution, but I guess I was a little bit disappointed as well because I thought I was really onto something. And then, I was never going to beat Tony. Yeah, I was. Too late though. But I was never going to be able to, to be fair, mine was going to be more of an oral history, so it would have been interviews with the people who are still alive and asking them questions and stuff. But Tony had obviously already done a lot of that in preparation for the book. He'd spoken to Steve Ince. I know they had long chats, and he'd spoken to a lot of other people as well. And my wife kind of kept on, prodding me, saying, you should message Tony, you should... You should, tell him that you're an editor now, because I'd interviewed Tony 10 years before for the Kickstarter for my own website, and Jane was convinced that, I could add something to it, and I just needed to reach out. And then I think Tony messaged me. I think when he saw the 25th anniversary Broken Sword interview I'd done with Charles, Tony messaged me and said, I'm actually doing a book. And I said to him, that's great, and I'm an editor, and I could have a little look over it for you if you want. And then he took about 10 seconds to reply, at which point I was saying to Jane, why did you make me do this? He doesn't want me reading it. And then Tony said, yeah, that'd be great. But the idea originally, I think, was for me to just have a glance over it. And that was that was 8 months ago or something like that. I say in my introduction to the book that we've rewritten it 3 times over, and people will probably just think that that's an exaggeration, but it's probably 4 times now. We've really gone through it, and I guess I'm a big fan of the games, and obviously I have that interaction with Charles, who's still at Revolution, and Tony, who's not been at Revolution for a while. So I think I was quite well placed to say when something was clear or something was unclear, or it took me a little while to get comfortable to tell Tony that he'd misremembered something about his own games. He'd say, what do I know? I only made it. But I think me and Tony have got a pretty good working partnership now and friendship. So I'd like to think I improved the accuracy of a few things, and I think I added a few things as well. And I'm always playing the games. I was replaying the Beneath the Steel Sky remastered recently, and Tony had forgotten all about the post-credits scene that they'd added for that. So that's in the book now. And I've been helping him do the research and stuff for it. So it's been really, really good. It hasn't felt like work at all. The Kickstarter is probably the point where it started to feel a bit like work, because we have to put ourselves out there rather than just chatting till 2 a.m. and discussing the book. So.
Yeah, I mean, I quite like, being a programmer. It's all about hiding away with your headphones on and computer screen in front of you and creating something, And writing turned out to be quite a similar thing in a way. I mean, it's quite, you can't do it all. It's a funny thing is writing. You can't do it all day. You can program all day if you're in the flow. I think writing, it's pretty difficult to do that. A couple of hours, 2-3 hours, and you're done with writing. But it's in every other way, it's very, very similar. So I quite enjoyed it, and that was, let's say, it was like programming. So it wasn't really work. And it was creative, and it was hiding from the world while making something that the world will hopefully like, But at the end of it, you've got to come out and promote it and stuff, and that's what we're doing now, which is, it's good fun to be interacting with fans and stuff and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's a bit more like work, isn't it? I mean, it's harder. It's harder for me because I don't naturally do that kind of thing, and probably Martin's the same.
Yeah, I think it's very different to people having a chat about something, and then the goal obviously is to put this book out and people love it, which I really do think they will, if they've got an interest in Revolution or even just the game industry. But it's a scary thing, Like, I knew that we were both nervous because we talk quite a lot, not just about the book. We talk every day, and I think the days leading up to it, we didn't talk much, but I think that was just nerves. But yeah, it seems to be going really, really well.
We kept putting it off the Kickstarter. I mean, mine was the button. Mine was the button to launch the thing, and it's like the weekend before we were kind of, then this is it now. There's nothing else to fix. There's nothing else to do. We're just going to do it, and then I just kept putting it off for all of the week, and then it got to Friday, and it was like, God, we just got to do it.
And then we rewrote that page. We rewrote the whole thing again.
We did it last minute. I did a lot of bullet points and stuff that actually improved the page quite a lot. So, but having done that, we had a bit of momentum, didn't we? And I just thought, we'll set it free and launch it. And
that's the risk, isn't it? You could tinker with the book and indeed the Kickstarter for months if you're not careful and think, there's that one thing I wanted to mention, or do I really want to put this? And before you know it, an enormous amount of time has passed, and you just got to be brave. I mean, you go, right, now's the time, here we go, press the button, and you've done it. And it's obviously paid off, because as I said earlier, 4 days in, it's funded. So now anything else on top of that's really going to be a nice welcome bonus.
Yeah, it's good that it did that, because basically I think, sort of studying Kickstarter a bit, there's two kind of Kickstarters really. There's ones that go through pretty quick, like literally 3 or 4 days max, and after that, I think that it's generally harder to get there is the general rule. So it's quite a relief. And the thing is, you've really no idea how Kickstarter is going to do. I mean, the Broken Sword 5 one, we had. You have a set of expectations. You've got disaster at one end, and you've got unbelievable at the other. And what's it going to be? It's going to be somewhere in between the two. Probably you can kind of rationalize and work it out that it should do all right. And we always kind of thought a Broken Sword 5 one should do all right, but there's no way to really know how many people are going to come and back it. You just don't know. So you in that sense, it's extremely frightening. Is Kickstarter or any other crowdfunding, I suppose. But this book, you can think about it, and it looks like it should do all right, because the book is actually pretty. Obviously, I would say it, but I think the book is pretty good. There's a lot in it, to be honest, and with Martin's help, it actually reads quite well as well. So you combine those two things, and it's not a bad thing. I think people who buy it will be pretty damn pleased with it, and get a lot from it. But you can say that, and it doesn't mean anything really. You can write your bullet points about what's in it, and you can do your little graphics and your video and all the rest of it. But you don't know. You've no idea. So to go through in 4 days it means we're on the right side of that particular win-lose situation. So we should be all right now.
And it's a fair size of a book, isn't it? What was it? About 600 pages.
It's more than that, isn't it?
I think it's about 400 pages of text and then 200 of images. But yeah, the Google Doc couldn't handle the volume or the amount of edits.
Google Docs.
Yeah.
It's the book that you make when you're doing it yourself, because if it had gone off to a publisher, they would have said, what the hell are all these photos? Who wants to see what your office looks like in 2003? Who wants to see that? It's actually pretty interesting, I think, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's like just captures the moment of people working on Beneath a Steel Sky, and it just happened to be in black and white film. And it was those pictures were on a film that I had in a drawer from the mid 90s, and I 3 years ago I got this film processed and to see what the hell was on it, because I had no idea, and it was a bunch of photos of the Steel Sky development, just really random stuff, testing the camera as much as anything, if I remember correctly. But to me, to find those photos and then be able to put them in the book and share them and have them duplicated and people see them is an important part of it. But I know if I'd sent that book off to a publisher, they'd have said, no, 400 photos, forget it. You can have 10 glossy pages in the middle, like a lot of books do, and that'll do, because that'll cost us 50 pence, and that's what we're going to do. You don't need all these other ones. You don't need 400 photos in this book. So strip it all out. That's what corporate publishing world would have said. But the luxury of taking the risk of the crowdfunding is that I can package the thing as I want it to be, and I like all those pictures, and there were a lot more. I still had to edit them down. So I've done the book that I wanted to do and said what I wanted to say, and I think it's pretty good.
Have you actually got the book to hand? There you go, someone's prepared. Go on, Martin. Can you get it onto camera so for those who are watching the video version of this can see the wedge that is this beautiful book?
You got to be careful lifting it. You can cause yourself some serious damage.
Look at that. Now, even that front cover, I think, went through quite a few permutations, didn't it?
Did you?
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
But it's a fair size of a book, so
I think when people receive it, they'll, it's not a small paperback that you buy to read on your flight. I guess it's good to prop up your house if it's starting to lean a bit.
It's a proper, serious hardback book. That is 600 pages, 400 pages of text, and 200 pages of photos. And as Tony was saying there earlier, I agree that there's going to be publishers who don't know the heritage of Revolution Software and your background, Tony, because this book is as much about you as it is Revolution Software. It goes pre-Revolution Software, your introduction to sort of game development, and then how did Revolution Software become what it is at the start.
Yeah, I suppose. It's not really a book about me. I don't think it's a book about me as such. The history of Revolution goes from. It goes literally right back to when I was still at school, because I wrote a game when I was at school and sent it. Even I left school at 16, and pretty much at that point I had a completed game for the Amstrad CPC, which I sent off to Arctic Computing, which was a publisher like 20 miles away from where I lived, and that is where Charles was working. So I mean, I met Charles at that point in 1986, I think it was. So that's why it starts at me writing those 8-bit games. But it's definitely not really a book about me. It's a book about the games industry and the context of the games industry in the context of where Revolution was relative to the games industry. So you can kind of say, this is how the game industry worked. This is how the business works, and how the corporations ran, and what the business models were. And Revolution is the example of a developer moving through that system. And obviously the individuals within it, like myself and Charles and various other people that pop up through the book. But it's more about our position relative to the games industry, and how it's a conflict. Basically, there's a conflict between creativity and corporations, and what corporations want, and that is a conflict.
Indeed. But of course, Revolution Software, what they're known for at its core is point-and-click adventure games, which, if you rewind to, Lure of the Temptress, Beneath a Steel Sky, and then probably the juggernaut that probably everyone really knows Revolution Software for, the Broken Sword series of games. That was a time when point-and-click adventure games that was the way you sort of immerse yourself in the story and the puzzle elements, and you'd listen to dialogue. And this was dialogue when it was floppy disks at a time, when it would be subtitled sort of details of reading what the characters were saying, and then later CD-ROM came out, and then you had a talkie version. Imagine saying that now, a talkie version of the game. It sounds almost like the 1920s cinema. Oh, we're going to go and see the talkie, love. Not like that, but in terms of point-and-click adventure games, that CD-ROM technology came out, and then the characters, you could actually hear them speaking. And then there was this beautiful period of point-and-click adventure games, and then it almost disappeared entirely. There was this lull for many years, and there was maybe like certain markets where there was smaller titles, but there was no big title. And there was that weird transition to 3D, and it was like, well, where does this genre sit within that? And that whole world of new discovery. But then again, more recently, in the last 5 years plus, you look at titles like Broken Sword 5, Day of the Tentacle Remastered, that's come out from LucasArts' sort of heritage back in the day, and others like Full Throttle. And point-and-click adventure games have suddenly become very relevant again. So I think in terms of timing of writing your book and telling a story of like the dawn, the early point-and-click adventure games, and how that's sort of transitioned through lots of upheaval. And again, one of the points you've made is, Revolution Software was a small development house compared to some of the other giants around at the time, which had a tremendous amount of risk, didn't it?
The risk for us that we wanted to write these narrative games. I mean, we liked that kind of thing, and we weren't necessarily completely obsessed with it being point and click, but we wanted to do stories, and we wanted to do characters, and we wanted to do puzzles. Really, we thought we had some flexibility with how we framed that kind of thing, but that was the style of gameplay that we wanted to do.
Oh dear.
And the games industry kind of moved away. It moved towards Resident Evil and Doom and stuff like that. And the publishers, the corporate side, just wanted to chase that kind of thing. So we were always fighting to do what we believed in. And sometimes we were doing it when we shouldn't have been doing it. So you had kind of conflicted games like In Cold Blood, which was being dragged in different directions, but it's all gone full circle several times, to be honest, and you come out where you are now, where point and click there's a nostalgia side to it, but there's also now a realization that, you know, who cares what the graphics are like or how many polygons it's throwing at the screen? I mean, no one does that anymore. So people are interested in characters and gameplay and enjoying yourself now again. So, you know, it is a good time because it's in the middle of another change, and anything's possible again, which takes it back to the kind of feeling we had in the 80s, you know, when computers first arrived. These amazing machines that can do anything, and it's kind of, to me, it feels a bit like that again, you know, because you can literally write anything these days, and if it's good, it'll hopefully find an audience, you know.
Well, to give you an idea, and I'll quote you from your Kickstarter, it almost sounds like a synopsis from a point-and-click adventure game. But external forces acting on the company threaten to destroy it at every step along the way. It sounds like a game in the making. But it really was that perilous at times, wasn't it? Where Revolution Software's entire existence was sometimes, oh yes, we've got a game in the pipeline, we've got funding, and then all of a sudden, oh no, we might be sort of end of life in the following few weeks.
There's a lot of near-death experiences in the story of Revolution, certainly. Yeah. But, you know, I don't think it's going to make. I don't think it's going to make a game. I think it's going to make a major motion picture, to be honest. Okay.
Have you decided who's going to play you, Tony?
Martin and I are talking to the big Hollywood people about it. Who's going to play me? Who's going to play Martin? That kind of thing. Yeah, Keanu Reeves is keen. He's keen, you know. Yeah, Charles is a difficult one. Charles is really difficult. We're trying to land the right person for Charles.
So what about for Tony?
Well, Keanu Reeves he's up for it, you know. But Tom Cruise as well has expressed an interest. So they're kind of competing for it.
Okay, I think we may have to take some of this in jest, ladies and gentlemen. But still, one day, who knows? Who knows?
You heard it here first.
Yeah, I could just see Tom Cruise playing Tony.
The Kickstarter video is a little bit of a homage to Tom's early career, in truth.
So, explain to the people watching and listening to this podcast then, a lot of this video is actually spent flipping floppy disks across the room. And I have to say, Tony, your catching skills have obviously diminished over the years, if that video is anything to go by. But what's the history of that? Why is that in the Kickstarter video?
That is what we found. In the early days, you know, early 90s, we had these offices that kept moving from different flats and dodgy offices in central Hull and stuff. And presumably you could, even as we started, you probably could get a network in your office, but it wasn't commonly done, and we didn't really know about it. So, you know, when we started, it was just me and Dave, and we had Atari STs and stuff like that, and Amigas, and we didn't have a network between these computers, you know. But we were always writing ST, Amiga, and PC, and Dave and I sharing the code and swapping graphics around. So the only way to do it is to put files on floppy disks and pass them around, you know. If you want the latest sprite, I've got it on a floppy or on my hard disks, and if I'm going to give it to you, the only way to do it is put it on the disk and give it to you. But, you know, if you're doing this all day long with lots of people, lots of files, I mean, getting up and delivering these floppies, it's kind of time consuming. So the way to do it is to throw them. And floppy, 3.5 inch floppy disks, if you get them at the right angle on the corner, get a good spin on them, you can deliver them with quite some accuracy and speed across an office space of some distance. But the important thing is to be able to catch them, because if you don't catch them, if they hit a wall or something, then they can basically break, as we found filming the Kickstarter, you know.
Yeah, we could have just used any old floppy disk, but you actually used a Beneath the Steel Sky one that got destroyed. It
fell apart, yeah. I mean, we ended up with a pile. Literally, we had 3 discs, and they all got damaged, and 2 of them fell apart in the space of half an hour of shooting this thing. Now, I don't actually remember them breaking at all.
I think the plastic had gone a bit brittle with age, to be fair.
Yeah,
or the
they were never. They were never that sensitive in the past, I don't remember. Because, I mean, we used to cut ourselves quite often, because if you catch them wrong, the sleeve, the metal sleeve they have, it's got sharp edges on it, and you can actually do yourself, and it's quite dangerous for humans, but the discs themselves always used to survive. But yeah, we trashed 3 of them making this video. Anyway, we thought we'd have a laugh and recreate that. The glory days of it's like ploughing a field with a Shire horse. There's like a few people that can still do it, and if they stop, then that's it. No one will know how to plough a field with a Shire horse. It's the same is true with throwing discs. You don't know when those skills are going to be needed again.
Watch this space.
Someone's got to maintain these traditions,
Absolutely. I'm sure grandchildren will be learning such skills and passing it on to their grandchildren, and they'll all talk about Tony Warriner. No, it sounds like a beautiful dream. I'm there. I'm following it, definitely. So in terms of the book and the content with it, obviously a lot of it's from the perspective of Mr. Tony Warriner and your feelings and the sort of feelings you were feeling around you. But in terms of research, it looks like Martin sort of contributes a lot of factual evidence, and I guess from your side of it, Tony, is like the development side, sort of live in it. It's maybe got a lot more emotion for you as you actually went through that and reliving those memories, but then you need to sort of, if I talk to, for example, Steve Ince, who's well known within the gaming world as a writer and an artist, but he'd probably have maybe a slightly different perspective to some of the events that happened that you remember. And then there's Martin with his sort of factual evidence as well and his thoughts. So how did all that tie in, and how did you get all that evidence together in the end? Was it quite an exercise?
Well, I mean, I still know a lot of people, obviously all 4 of us that were founders are still around. We're not that old, so it's not, it goes back 30 years, but not like 60 years, So I mean, we're all around still. I mean, Steve's around, and he was there at the beginning. So over the years, there's been a lot of people come through Revolution, and a great number of them I still talk to. So, there's a lot. I did speak to lots of people, and ask them very specific questions about what they remember about certain things. And everyone claims they don't remember stuff, and then if you can go in there with a very specific thing that relates to them, then it's surprising what people will actually remember if you find the way of unlocking it. Basically, if you say, Dave, I'll go up to Dave and I'll say, do you remember 1993? And he'll be like, no, to be honest. But if I could say, well, we went to Wales and we did this, we worked on this particular piece of code, and we dropped a computer and it was a nightmare, and and you go, oh yeah, I remember all of that, and then he'll add something to it, because you remember certain, if you think back something years ago, you'll remember little highlights of what happened, but other people will have other highlights. So it's absolutely worth talking to people and poking around to figure out how to get these memories out of them, because it's all there. So the more people you talk to, and they don't want to do it because it's difficult, they're saying why we do, but then they get interested in it and start remembering stuff, and it all starts to come out, and then of course you've got 2 people's recollections of something, so then you go with those 2 sets of memories to a third person, and you say, oh, remember this, remember that, and that triggers their memories, and it all comes out, and then it's the case of putting it down, and then it's preserved, because it's so many things were almost buried. There was very little photography going on in the 90s because there was no cameras on phone. There was no phones, no mobile phones, no cameras on those non-existing mobile phones. So people aren't just going around shooting videos of a meeting and snapping pictures of the office or what's on the screens and stuff. It just didn't exist. So, what there is and what memories can be brought out of people, it's just felt very important to get it, while it can be got at and written down, and then there's a memory now. It's a written document that explains a lot of stuff. So it's of value, I think.
Well, absolutely. And Martin, I mean, how have you found the whole experience of being part of this book and maybe keeping Tony a little in check at times, and also sort of figuring out how this information's collated together, because it's as you've seen, the size of the book, it's not small, so this must have been quite a labour of love for both of you. But Martin, how do you feel about the whole process yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think I knew about the book before it was finished, because we talked about it and I was going to edit it. So I think in the run up to the book being sent to me as a document, I was playing in Cold Blood, and me and Tony were talking a lot, and that was quite fun, because it was like having a director's commentary as you're playing the game, right? I'm messaging Tony and saying, this bit's really cool, or, oh, I forgot about this bit, because I hadn't played it for a long time, and I feel like that's one of the more underrated Revolution games. But I remember when Tony sent me the book, he's a little bit modest. He says, like, I kind of got it into shape, and I guess I did, because in some ways, because when he sent it to me, it didn't have any chapters. It kind of started, and then there was bits where it had natural breaks and where he'd kind of done like a line break or whatever, but it wasn't like defined the way it is now, where we've got, I can't remember how many chapters now, maybe 35 chapters or whatever.
30 odd.
So I knew when I was reading it that it was good. I knew also it needed structure, because that's one of the nice things about reading a book, right? You kind of flick ahead and go, I've got a few more pages, I'll finish this chapter and then call it a night. Or you go, oh, I want to, how long have I got left, because I'm really enjoying this bit or whatever. But I knew it was good because I kind of devoured it in the space of like, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, and I was working, and my wife was pregnant at the time as well, so I was really busy. But as a fan, I really enjoyed that very, very first draft, which I guess neither of us can really remember how much it's changed, but I reckon if we went back and had a look at it, we'd be pretty shocked, because we've changed it a lot. But it was fun.
You must have learned quite a lot of stuff you didn't know.
Yeah, I think I probably have a little bit more knowledge than some, just because I've interviewed a lot of the guys. Like, I've interviewed Steve Ince, I've interviewed Charles, I'd interviewed Tony about 10 years ago probably, and I kind of have that interest in Revolution beyond just playing the games. I kind of, if there's a magazine out with an interview with Charles, like a Retro Gamer, or I had a Retro Gamer issue actually with Tony, where they gave away Beneath the Steel Sky on the cover disc and stuff like that. So I was always kind of emailing and making a bit of a nuisance of myself and asking these questions. But I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know, or like there was a lot of things where people think they know the answer. So like people will answer the question when it gets asked, and they'll say, oh, this is the answer. And I think the interesting thing about this book is that it's almost definitive in some ways. It kind of sets the record straight on a lot of things. And you're not going to get more definitive than this, really, because people are going to start forgetting stuff. So it's probably come at a really good time. As Tony said, it's not the case that like they're all really, really old, but we're as I edited the book, once you got to like a certain point, Tony had really detailed notes, and we started to have a lot more images, and I even had images and like emails and things from the Broken Sword 5 Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff. But earlier on in the book, it's quite impressive, really, because when I went to Hull and sat with Tony, he just pulled out a big pile of handwritten things, and Tony sometimes would struggle to read what something said, or we'd look at, you write a note at the time and you know exactly what it means, but you look at it 30 years later and you're like, what did that mean? So some things will be lost forever. But I've described it a few times as a treasure trove, and I think it is. I think if you're a fan of Revolution, or you love those games, or they mean something to you, and I think Revolution's fans are pretty passionate and pretty, it's different being a fan of Revolution, I guess, than being a fan of Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or something like that. I think Broken Sword fans especially are very passionate about that series, and there's groups online on Facebook where people are constantly talking about those games and constantly asking questions like about George, about Nico, as if they're real people. So it was quite cool to get that insight into how these things were made, and it's not just a dry recollection, it's kind of the people who were there, because that's the story, right? It's a bunch of people sitting in a room and making something happen. So Tony says it's not a story about him, it's about revolution, but I think that the selling point of the book for me when I first read it was that it was Tony's voice, and that was the challenge editing it. I wanted to make sure, obviously, that everything was as grammatically correct as possible and that it read nicely and it had the chapters and all these things. I love editing and writing, so I enjoy that stuff. Tony probably found that a little bit tedious sometimes because I'd hone in on things and say, we need to talk about this and this and this and this. But the thing that was tricky was, I guess, balancing that with making sure that you didn't tone down Tony's voice, because I think that's why it's a good book. So yeah, he's very modest, but it's as much his story as it is the story of revolution, because he was there at the beginning, right? It was 4 people in Wales, deepest, darkest Wales, as he says in the book, and eating chicken, smoking silk cut cigarettes, because back then cigarettes were fine, and just deciding that they're going to do something cool, and it's still going today, so it's impressive.
And Tony, just cover your ears for a moment, sir, while me and Martin talk about you some more. But absolutely, I mean, I've known Tony for a number of years now, and he's got a very unique take on things, and I love the way his mind works. So I would have hated to see that lost. So the fact that you've been making sure that's kept in there, because this is, I mean, I probably saw a fairly early draft of the book. I'm not sure how old it is now, but it's probably quite a bit old. But I loved it. It was Tony. You could tell it was Tony writing this book, and I'm sure you've kept that sense of Tony in there, and that's what makes it special as well. As much as it is about Revolution software, it's Tony's quirky take on it, which I think is going to be a very nice way of describing the whole story from start to finish.
All that's gone. It's Martin then.
It's all in my voice now. No, but I agonised over it, because you can look at a sentence and go, yeah, that's not quite right grammatically, but then you change it so that it's perfectly, grammatical, and it's the way it should be. Sorry, I can't tell whether you can see the air quotes. But then you lose the voice. So it was a case of I didn't just go in there and make changes. Like every change that was made, Tony would review it. But I very quickly became quite comfortable because Tony, I think, trusts me now to. I feel like I can kind of edit in Tony's voice, if that makes sense. So I know when I'm doing an edit, it's not so much the way I would do it if I was writing it. It's the way that I would imagine if Tony was talking to me, and we talk quite a lot, and we've hung out together and stuff, and he's came here and I've visited there, so it's quite an interesting place to be inside Tony Warriner's head.
It's not a good place to be.
I'll stop it.
I drink a lot more nowadays. Yeah.
You ready? You'll have the skill set for when we do part 2 in 30 years' time, anyway.
Yeah, God. The paperback, that's the next thing, isn't it?
So what was the response like from those involved with Revolution Software? Because there must have been a certain amount of, oh, that sounds like a great idea, and then there was probably a portion of people who went, oh, flipping it, do we really want this to be public? Maybe some apprehension. How did the general feel go back at Revolution Software, and people are maybe not there now but still thinking about, I won't say skeletons in the closet, but close to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I get on pretty well with Charles and Lauren still. I mean, we had the story of Revolution is all kind of not fighting, but pulling this way and that. And it was a sort of quite a dynamic relationship between the 4 founders. And certainly myself, Charles and Lauren were always like, one of us was always like, trying to go a different way from the other 2, and that dynamic would shift around and stuff at different times. So, sometimes we were falling out, and sometimes we weren't, and stuff like that. So, I'm not working there anymore, although my wife is, funnily enough. But I know them quite well still, and see them fairly often. So, I don't think they were ever enormously worried about it. But they were kind of probably apprehensive as to what it was going to be, or what the tone was going to be, because you can write anything and it can have any tone to it. So until you read it, you don't know exactly what it's going to be. So I imagine, and a few of the people that I've spoken to, they were kind of because there were a few people I went to with like a very specific question. Do you remember this particular software tool we were writing? And they were like, well, why are you asking me that? It was 15 years ago. And I'll say something like, well, it's just going to go in this book about Revolution. And they're like, oh, what else have you said about me, you know? And I'm like, no, don't worry. It's nothing bad, you know? I mean, there's nothing in it that's like, oh, these people at Revolution were real bad people, you know? The antagonists in this book are the corporate forces, the ones that were constantly trying to stab us in the back or whatever it was for their own gain. Those are the bad guys, and there was certainly, you know, the sharks circling the Revolution pond, and there were always plenty of those. So, I mean, I doubt those people that were involved in the publishing side of the story are of any interest whatsoever, if anything I would write. But for anyone interested in the games, to know that there was this flip side that they never see, you know, will be interesting, I think. Because it's not, you know, you imagine, it's your favorite developer, they're writing a game, you know, and you just imagine they're writing a game, and there's a lot more going on. There's a lot of very unpleasant stuff going on in the background that runs alongside these games, you know, as they're made. I mean, probably in any game you can go and talk to the people that made it, and there'll be all sorts of stuff that they were constantly fighting with, you know. I mean, it's never easy unless you've got somehow got an unlimited budget, you know, which virtually no one has. So, you know, if you're out there trying to fund a game, you're dealing with sharks, and you've got to be careful. And the sort of tricks they get up to is the thing that I talk about quite a lot. So they're the bad guys, to be honest. If the book has bad guys, and there are, I think, would you agree, Martin? There's some quite interesting stories to do with corporate forces that people won't be expecting. But I don't think those people involved from that side of the world will be the least bit interested in anything I've got to say. But, you know, they're probably frying bigger fish.
That's one thing we realised, though, right? Like that's one thing that we were really. That's one thing we kind of went over quite a lot. Like, how much do you lay into stupid behaviour? And what we realised very quickly was you don't need to. If it's stupid behaviour, you don't even need to pass comment on it. Like, it kind of speaks for itself. And that's another good thing about the book. It's obviously Tony has got opinions, but, you know, it's not hyperbole or Tony kind of overreacting to things. Some of these things are just shockingly appalling or stupid because they're appalling or stupid, you know. But as Tony was saying, people buy a game and they're perhaps not happy, or, you know, in cold blood, I don't like this, or, you know, why have they done Broken Sword 3 in 3D? It's not like Revolution just sits there and decides to ruin people's day. There's a reason for it, you know. I don't think they could have made a Broken Sword 3 at that time in 2D. You know, so that journey you were talking about adventure games being popular and then kind of declining and coming back, it's kind of like the through line of the book, I guess, because by the time it gets to Broken Sword 5, the publisher issue is gone, but it's replaced with the realities of being a publisher and a developer, right, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, that was the interesting thing about kickstarting games, of course. You know, the backers were suddenly exposed to some of the dark underbelly of game development, where things go wrong and you know, decisions have to be reversed and unpleasant decisions have to be made about things that involve costings or technology and stuff like that. And, you know, normally that's all behind closed doors, and it's conversations you have with publishers. If you crowdfund a game, you have to have those conversations with backers, and they're suddenly exposed to all sorts of unpleasantness they weren't expecting. I think that's part of the reason why actually crowdfunding games is on a bit of a downer at the moment, because, you know, it was going to be back in the day when we did Broken Sword 5 and you know, Schaefer did his game Double Fine. You know, there was a euphoria for crowdfunding, and it was going to be the savior of the games industry. And we kind of timed our entry into that quite well with Broken Sword 5, and I don't think that would repeat now, because so many people have been burnt. But, you know, that that burning used to happen, but it used to happen behind closed doors, and only developers and publishers would be involved in it. And crowdfunding exposed everybody to that. So I think that's why it's a bit out of fashion at the moment. But hopefully it will actually come back, and people will crowdfund big games again, because it is a good way to do it, And it's it really is the corporations that ruin games. Corporate gaming is not a good place to be if you want to be creative. So I've got big hopes that it will come back, but I think the confidence has got to be slowly rebuilt.
Indeed. And I guess that's the beauty of the book as well. You've been able, as you said earlier, it's your own, and between the two of you, you've been able to tell this story without anyone sort of poking, oh, you can't say that. Oh, no, they don't want news photos. No, get rid of them. Who'd be interested in that? Bubblecom. No. And, I've published things in the past, and I've had sort of people saying, oh, no, you can't write that. You can't say this. No, you got to write this. And I'm thinking, flipping egg, it's just not my work anymore. So from that sort of perspective, I'm sure Martin knows where I'm coming from as well. There's that heart-wrenching moment where that creation, that thought, is almost being like, oh, no, you don't want to do that, no. And it's like, oh, what? This is you're ruining my masterpiece. But you've got the control. And I guess Kickstarter's also giving these software development houses that control back again, that they're not being dictated to. Maybe it's a little bit scary because it's the community direct, and they can be quite vicious at times as well, But regardless, it's giving you far more authority over that creative work. So good on you. And I wish more and more people get into this sort of almost independent sort of publishing, whether it's a book or it's a game. Certainly on this scale, I think it's certainly very achievable. And obviously you've appealed to an audience because it was funded in 4 days.
Well, I mean, games or writing, it's all about the artist at one side and the players or readers at the other, And really, there isn't any other relationship that really matters, Traditional games publishing or book publishing, the middle bit is distribution and manufacturing, the stuff that you wouldn't normally want to get involved in. But that's all those things are, But they that side of it shouldn't be controlling it. The art side should be, it's what the artist does and what the readers want that's important, not what the corporate bit in the middle dictates or should be allowed to dictate. And that's the same for any artistic work, really.
Well, I have a couple of questions. So Martin was kind enough to put this out on the Kickstarter for anybody who was interested, and I did some tweets, and we've had a couple. So Bob Peterson asked the following: will there be any content in the printed book that won't be in the PDF? I'm wondering if I should upgrade my support level.
No, it's the same.
No, I mean the PDFs with every tier, but the PDF only one is there because of shipping. Basically, it's a big book. The flip side to that is I had somebody message me the other day saying, "Can you do it to China?" And I kind of said, "I can ask Tony, but it's probably going to be quite expensive." As soon as Tony added it, I mean, it was quite expensive. They backed, so people want the book, but the PDF is there for obviously people who perhaps don't want to spend that money.
I mean, it's better as a book. I think.
That's the way it's been designed, isn't it?
A book is better, but shipping is expensive, and we appreciate that. So, I mean, that's why the PDF is there, really. I mean, we kind of debated it a bit. At one point, we weren't going to have a PDF, and then we were going to have a PDF, and then it was like, how much should it be? And that's quite a difficult question. I mean, the PDF is a file. It's a big file, but it is just a file. So, what's the value of a file? Well, the value is what's written and what's printed there. And that in a way is no different from the value of a book. But it's nicer in book form. So, I hope people buy the book version of it. And generally, looking at the stats, there's very few people buying the PDF. Actually, less than we expected so far.
It's still nice though. I mean, I've used the PDF obviously when I'm in work and I don't want to lug the book around on my iPad or whatever, and you're still getting everything that you get in the book. But as Tony said, that's the way it was. That was our thing. We didn't just want to do a book. We wanted to do a really special book. We wanted it to be crammed full of images. We wanted to. We talked a lot about the design of it and how it was going to be presented. So yeah, in terms of the content, it's the same, but it was very much conceived as an actual physical thing.
I mean, the PDF that people will receive if they buy the PDF is the same PDF as the printers will get to print the book from, so more or less. So slightly different format, admittedly, but it's the same. It's the same source material. So there's a thing called InDesign. InDesign, it'll kick out files for the printers and it'll kick out the PDF. The source machine, the source is the same. So, apart from signatures and nice things like that, it's exactly the same.
Okay. Next question, Nikki Hutchinson. We've loosely discussed this, but let's try and get a little bit more detail from you. So, do you know how many times did you have to rewrite the book, either through altering certain wording or double-checking how things went down during the look back at Revolution history?
Well, I mean, I wrote the whole thing just start to end, as Martin said, and then we just kept going over it, like first pass and second pass, and probably a third pass, and just refining it really. And I kept remembering new stuff. So as Martin was like going ahead of me, trying to fix the writing up to be smoother and all the rest of it, I was like jumping around the book, adding stuff in, and kind of ruining the fact that if Martin was halfway through his second pass of the editing, I'd be behind him changing stuff because I'd remembered some more things, So it was he'd get to the end and go, oh well, I'm going to have to start again now because Tony's added a load more stuff. So that's why we kept going over it again and again and again.
Well, we were talking all the time as well, though, right? So we were, as you said, you were constantly adding stuff in. It wasn't even like it was just behind me. I'd edit a paragraph, and as I've done the paragraph, I'm gone, that's a great paragraph. That's perfect. Tony had just started like typing stuff, and I'd see all the words move about, and the lines would move, and I'd be like, okay, I'll go make a cup of coffee or something and come back because this is still getting tinkered with,
And it's still getting tinkered with because I keep remembering things, and it doesn't go to print. It's not going to go to print for, I don't know, a few weeks. Yeah, it could be 6 weeks, could be 2 months before it actually goes to print. So it's still actually being edited, and I have remembered some stuff I'm going to put in it. So it's not finished yet.
My intro says we've rewritten it together 3 times, and I reckon you can add another one on top of that because we obviously showed it to Charles and Neuren, and now we're doing a final check before the final copies are printed. So maybe if you wanted to put a number on it, maybe 5 times, but each of those times we've been jumping all over the place. My daughter was born in May, and I finished doing the chapters the day before she was born. She was born early, and I remember thinking, thank God I got the book done before she was born. Perfect timing. It was just so naive. Like, what you had a date in mind, didn't you, Tony, when I first got sent it? And you were like, so you'll read through this and then we'll do the Kickstarter this date. And it was like 5 months ago or something like that. So,
well, I thought it was kind of done really, and we just fixed the spelling here and there and stuff.
I mean, did you expect me to edit it to the extent did you think I was just going to read through it in a week kind of thing? Or?
Well, I thought it'd be quite a quick thing, but I mean, I'd never written a book before, and I never. Well, I read that Stephen King book about writing, and he's kind of he's making a big deal about the first draft and the fact that you do an awful lot in the second one. And I was like, I mean, I know he's Stephen King, but is he right about this? I mean, on the one hand, he's Stephen King. On the other, I can't quite understand why second draft and third draft are so difficult and time consuming. But I certainly know now. First draft is pretty important because you've got it from start to end, but it is a lot more work to get a book. to final state. But then video games are the same, as you see from the book. I mean, the Broken Sword games are a good example. I mean, they were all rubbish until like 2 weeks before they were published, because it was all just tuning, going over it and playing it, tuning it. And that's why the Revolution games were as good as they were, because we kept tuning them, And it's why a lot of games come out these days on like early access and or whatever, and they're actually quite ropey. It's because it's quite hard to finish a game in the way it's quite hard to finish a book, and people run out of time and run out of money and pump them out and keep working on them. Patch this, patch. It's like I could publish the book back in April, and then I'd imagine I've been patching it every 2 months. As we, if we'd patched the book, it's much better now. It's much better. All these bugs are gone. All these mistakes are gone. I mean, that's how it would have been. It's just we've done it ourselves and published it at the end. Tuning things up and polishing is most of the work, to be honest.
Yeah, you mean, or you realise that you've slightly misspelt the surname of somebody who's mentioned quite a lot, who wasn't at Revolution but was perhaps kind of important elsewhere, and then you're doing a Control F to try and find every instance of that name, but on this Google Doc it's already running pretty slow because we've pushed it beyond the limitations it was designed for. Yeah, I mean, that's in my introduction as well. I tried to find other people who'd broken it. I think a team of researchers took 4 years to break it, and we've broken it countless times. So, but it's good though. I mean, if this was 10 years ago, what would we have been doing? I think I read a thing about Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman faxing each other chapters of Good Omens to write it together. Like how they did that, I do not know. We're very lucky we've got all this technology where I can jump on a call and say to Tony, hey, I don't know if this bit's right, or I've just played in Cold Blood. It's quite a short game. You've said it's quite a long game, stuff like that. So.
Have you've played in Cold Blood, James?
Not in a long time.
It's a big game, though, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I'm nodding. I'm forgetting there's an audio podcast now.
It's a big game. It's a big game, Martin.
Huge.
As huge as your book.
Probably, yeah.
That's why we need the dedicated one chapter to it, because otherwise we'd need to do another Kickstarter just about in Cold Blood. Maybe that's what we'll do next.
Yeah, history of in Cold Blood.
Just volume 1 of 7.
Yeah, I mean, just a walkthrough of in Cold Blood. I mean, that'll be a big book, wouldn't it? Just the Land Train. And that's a book in itself, isn't it, really?
Yeah. This is the one thing that I couldn't convince Tony of. So maybe if people are listening, comment on the Kickstarter. Let us know, is in Cold Blood as big as Tony thinks? I think that I can see why they think it's big, because when you're developing it, you're not playing it,
The joke is everyone at Revolution is under the very correct.
I've tried to find other people to agree with me, and I've been shot down. Charles shot me down. Steve shot me down.
We are all fully understanding that in Cold Blood is an absolutely massive game, and for some reason Martin doesn't see it that way. But the weight of public opinion is not on his side at all.
It's not. I had. That's the one thing that I never got my way with, but it'll haunt me. I'm just going to tip X out that bit on the final version of the book, and I'm just going to write what I was going to suggest.
And no one will know. Because tip X is so discreet.
Yeah. No, I just meant for my copy. God, I'm not doing it for everyone's copy. It's always going to be bad enough signing them, I think. We were talking about the logistics of that last night. That's another problem for another day.
Yeah. I mean, but it depends how many we sell, really. But these books take quite a lot of space up, don't they? They're big things.
Yeah. I mean, when I visited Tony last, he said this is the box that the 10 pre-production copies came in, and they went packed tightly, I don't think, but they were huge. They were taking up the whole landing outside his flat, and then we were looking at each other like, and where are we going to put all these books that we're going to hopefully sell? But we've got a plan. We've got a plan.
It sounds like a live video stream watching Tony sign them all to me.
Yeah.
I like signing things, apart from contracts.
Oh, that's a good shout. I'd definitely say that. So the name of the book, Revolution, The Quest for Game Development Greatness. If you're listening to this podcast not long after it's been published, you have until Sunday, October the 16th, 2022, just in case you're listening to this in a few years' time, at 9 p.m. British summertime. And as we've been talking, you've now got 180 backers. That's over the £8,000 goal you're hoping for. That's £8,828 with still 24 days to go. Pretty spectacular stuff. Guys, credit to the both of you for doing this. It must have been an absolute passion. I can see Martin's enthusiasm has got him for it. His absolute love for Revolution software and everything around it. And Tony, you've lived it. You wanted to share it. The highs, the lows, and everything in between. Floppy disk damage. Neither here nor there. But anyway, thanks for joining me today, guys, on this special, and we hope to see you all again soon on the Game and Gadget Podcast.